kunja vihari. Gopi jana vallabha girivardhari. Yashoda nandana braja jana ranjana. Yamuna tira vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astar Sata Shri Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantharaj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, The Glories of Devotional Service, Text 41. nānyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ bhayam tīvraṁ nivartate nānyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ bhayam tīvraṁ nivartate nānyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ bhayam tīvraṁ nivartate. Anyone else? Nānyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ nivartate nānyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ bhayam tīvraṁ nivartate nānyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ bhayam tīvraṁ nivartate anyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ bhayam tīvraṁ nivartate. Vaishnavis. Nānyatra bhagavataḥ pradhāna-puruṣeśvarāt ātmanaḥ sarva-bhūtānāṁ bhayam tīvraṁ nivartate. Na, not, anyatra, otherwise, mat, than myself, Bhagavataḥ, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, pradhāna-puruṣa-īśvarāt, the Lord of both prakṛti and purusha, ātmanaḥ, the soul, sarva-bhūtānāṁ, of all living beings, bhayam, fear, tīvraṁ, terrible, nivartate, is forsaken. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself, for I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. Purport. It is indicated herein that the cycle of birth and death cannot be stopped unless one is a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. It is said, hariṁ vinā mṛtim taranti. One cannot surpass the cycle of birth and death unless one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The same concept is confirmed herewith. One may take to the system of understanding the absolute truth by one's own imperfect sensory speculation, or one may try to realize the self by the mystic yoga process. But whatever one may do, unless he comes to the point of surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no process can give him liberation. One may ask if this means that those who are undergoing so much penance and austerity by strictly following the rules and regulations are endeavoring in vain. The answer is given by Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 10.2.32. Yen arvindaksha vimukta-māninaḥ. Lord Brahma and the demigods prayed to the Lord when Krishna was in the womb of Devaki. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, there are persons who are puffed up with the thought that they have become liberated or one with God, or have become God, but in spite of thinking in such a puffed up way, their intelligence is not laudable. They are less intelligent. It is stated that their intelligence, whether high or low, is not even purified. In purified intelligence, a living entity cannot think otherwise than in surrender. Bhagavad-gītā, therefore, confirms that purified intelligence arises in the person of a very wise man. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavamam prapadyate. After many, many births, one who is actually advanced in intelligence surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. Without the surrendering process, one cannot achieve liberation. The Bhagavatam says, those who are simply puffed up, thinking themselves liberated by some non-devotional process, are not polished or clear in intelligence, for they have not yet surrendered unto you. In spite of executing all kinds of austerities and penances, or even arriving at the brink of spiritual realization and Brahman realization, they think that they are in the effulgence of Brahman, but actually, because they have no transcendental activities, they fall down in material activities. One should not be satisfied simply with knowing that one is Brahman. He must engage himself in the service of the Supreme Brahman. That is bhakti. The engagement of Brahman should be the service of Parabrahman. It is said that unless one becomes Brahman, one cannot serve Brahman. The Supreme Brahman is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the living entity is also Brahman. Without realization that he is Brahman, spirit, soul, and eternal servitor of the Lord, if one simply thinks that he is Brahman, his realization is only theoretical. He has to realize and at the same time engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. Then he can exist in the Brahman status. Otherwise, he falls down. The Bhagavatam says that because non-devotees neglect the transcendental loving service of the Lord, of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, their intelligence is not sufficient, and therefore these persons fall down. The living entity must have some activity. If he does not engage in the activity of transcendental service, he must fall down to material activity. As soon as one falls down to material activity, there is no rescue from the cycle of birth and death. It is stated here by Lord Kapila, quote, "Without my mercy," end quote, nānyatra mad bhagavataḥ. The Lord is stated here to be Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, indicating that he is full of all opulences and is therefore perfectly competent to deliver one from the cycle of birth and death. He is also called pradhāna because he is the Supreme. He is equal to everyone, but to one who surrenders to him, he is especially favorable. It is also confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā that the Lord is equal to everyone. No one is his enemy, no one is his friend. But to one who surrenders unto him, he is especially inclined. By the grace of the Lord, simply by surrendering unto him, one can get out of this cycle of birth and death. Otherwise, one may go on in many, many lives and may many times attempt other processes for liberation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. So in this verse, it's mentioned bhayam tīvraṁ. It's a terrible fear. So we are not meant to experience this terrible fear. That is not our original nature. Original nature is to be abhayam, without fear. And our original nature is to be without fear. We say A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The A.C. means Abhaya Charanaravinda. One who takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord is fearless. So, we want to attain that position of fearlessness from the cycle of birth and death. In one sense, fear or bhayam is part of the system of rasas or eternal spiritual relationships between the Lord and his eternal servants. Like sometimes Damodar, child Krishna, apparently displays some fear of Mother Yashoda, or Mother Yashoda fears that Krishna is in danger from jackals or thieves or things like that. So fear can also be a spiritual emotion that's part of the soul's eternal ongoing relationship with Krishna and his eternal pastimes. But that's not the kind of fear that we're talking about here. Maybe a perverted reflection of a spiritual reality, but in this material world, everyone is ultimately afraid. We say eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada translates defending as bhayam, fearing. Ahara, eating, nidra, sleeping, mṛtim is mating, and bhayam is defending or fearing. When we defend, we're defending against something that we're afraid of. That's like, the United States and other countries have their defense ministries or defense departments. Why? Because they're afraid of what others may do to them in this material world. Because the other country has atomic weapons, I have to have atomic weapons. Because the other country has big armed forces, I have to have big armed forces. But no matter how big an army they have, or how big a military they have, or how many atomic weapons they may have, they can't get away from fear of the ultimate thing, birth and death. Because that is an unnatural condition for the soul. Najayate mriyate va kadachin. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad-gītā, for the soul, there is neither birth nor death. It's only when we identify with the material body and try to enjoy the material energy through the material senses that we're subjected to this fear of birth and death. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Krishna has a form of eternality, knowledge, and bliss. And because we're part and parcel of Krishna, we have the same qualities of eternality, knowledge, and bliss. But when we forget that our primary activity, constitutional activity, is the pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we get absorbed in this duality of birth and death. Bhayam dvitiyam abhinaveshata syat ishade petasya viparyo asmriti. Says in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, where does this fear come from? How does this come into existence if we're eternally existing and there should be no fear of birth and death? Because in the spiritual world, in our constitutional position, there is no such thing. So bhayam comes from dvitiyam, thinking there is some other position other than devotional service. And what is that other thing? Ishade petasya, we turn away from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his service. Krishna Bhairmukahana Bhogavanchakare Nikatashtamayatare Drapati Adare. When we turn from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his service, and we think we can enjoy independently from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we're put in a position of asmritihi. We forget our svarupa, our original spiritual form, which is not only Brahman, aham brahmasmi, it's said, but in addition to that, we have to know that the duty of the jiva soul as Brahman, part and parcel of the Param Brahma, is to render service to the Param Brahman. So we shouldn't only realize our spiritual identity, we also have to realize the activity of Brahman, which is service to the Supreme Brahman. So if we're not in that position, then we become subject to this bhayam tīvraṁ, this fear of birth and death. At least most people fear death. And but that also means another birth. We're informed in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that the soul in the womb prays not to be born again. So we should be aware of that. And then in addition, we're subject to all kinds of other fears on the material level of existence. Are you afraid of anything? I'm afraid of sharks. Don't like to go in the ocean because there's sharks there. And I've seen some videos of, and then, in Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna says, of aquatics, I am the shark. So I think these sharks must be especially attracted to devotees who go in the water, the ocean waters, so I don't go in. But we should be afraid of the power of the material energy. Srila Prabhupada once said of his disciples, you're not enough afraid of Maya. So that is the biggest fear for a devotee, that they might become influenced once more by the material energy. So Srila Prabhupada is making the point in this purport that it's only by pure devotional service that one can become free from the cycle of birth and death. vimukta-māninaḥ tvayastra bhavad avishuddha buddhaya. One should be Buddha, one should be intelligent, but the intelligence of those who are simply content with Brahman realization is considered impure because they're just thinking that they're liberated. Because the soul has a tendency to act, unless one becomes engaged in the activity of devotional service, one will again be attracted to engage in material activities. And what do we mean by material activities? Those are activities that are selfishly motivated, where one is thinking of one's own pleasure instead of the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in that condition, as long as one is in that position of thinking one can enjoy independently of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one remains subjected to this fear of birth and death. But the devotees of the Lord, they aren't subject to that fear. Narayana parasarve na kukachana bibyate. Those who are surrendered to Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna, they aren't afraid in any circumstance. Svargapavarga narakesh abhitulyarta darshana. Whether they're in this world or the heavenly worlds, even there in the heavenly planets, there are difficulties. The demigods have some fear of being attacked by the asuras. Sometimes the asuras take over the whole universe, like Hiranyakashipu and others done, Bali Maharaj. So, and what to speak of being in the hellish planets? You know, that is a very lamentable condition. But those who are surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they don't fear any position, whether it's in the heavenly planets or the earthly realm or the lower realms. They're satisfied in any position. Sarva-dharman prityaja mamikam sharanam vraja aham tam sarva papebhyo moksha yishyami ma suchaha. Ma suchaha, don't worry, don't fear. If you're surrendered to me, if you've given up trying to take shelter of all these other processes of karma, fruit of activity, jnana, mental speculation, and impersonal realization, then you'll be in that position of being bhayam, fearless. So those are a few thoughts about today's verse and purport. Are there any comments, questions?
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. I was just wondering about the Brahman aspect and kind of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I was like kind of thinking about maybe like someone like Jesus Christ, like who was serving God, maybe not in the form of the personality of Godhead, like Krishna directly, but was still rendering service. So if someone is rendering service to God still, but not in the conception of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will they still attain Krishna in the end because they're engaged in service, or will they still fall down because they're only have like a conception of Brahman realization?
Well, it's interesting. When I was doing some study for this class, I was searching on the database for different things. And Srila Prabhupada, in one of the conversations there, was asked by one of the devotees, is there a planet for Christ? because we know there are different planetary systems, different heavenly planets, different Vaikuntha planets. And he said, yes, why not? So there is, and many times, well, maybe not many, but several times, Srila Prabhupada mentioned in his books and in his talks that he considered Christ to be a Shaktivesh avatar of Krishna. So, he said there is some benefit for souls who actually follow the instructions of Christ and worship him, that can be accepted as a kind of devotional service. May not lead to realization of Krishna in his original form, but Krishna has many forms, many different kinds of expansions, and there's some benefit to that if they actually follow the instructions. Is there any other comment on that, Archita?
Regarding Christ, he was not an impersonalist. Obviously he said, I've come to take you to the house of the Father. Father means person. So he was not just Brahman realized, he was a personalist. And Krishna, Prabhupada even mentioned, if you read Science of Self-Realization, Christ, Krishna, Christo. So he's making a connection between Christ and Krishna. Whether Christ himself was aware? Probably, because Prabhupada said, as far as he knows, Christ went to India, he went to Jagannath Puri. So he's worshipping Jagannath. He said, why would they let him into the temple there if he was not a worshiper of Jagannath? Jagannath means Lord of the universe, we know. So when we're speaking specifically about Christ, he was a personalist, he was not an impersonalist. Now there are others in other traditions, or maybe even some in Christianity, they don't have a clear understanding. So they're worshiping God, but if you say God is a person, they become confused because they don't have a clear understanding. And in some traditions, they even say God has no face, and if you make a painting of God with a face, then you're a blasphemer, etc. So others may be confused, but as far as Prabhupada indicated, Christ was not confused.
I have a question.
Do you want to let him go first?
Yeah, it's a short comment. Thank you. Thanks for a nice class, Drutakarma Prabhu. I just wanted to mention that as far as going back to Godhead goes, it's not a matter of merely going through the motions, doing all the practices, and following everything correctly. There's more, that's mechanical. We have to go beyond the mechanical and go to the adorational. Adorational means to revere, to love, to look up to see this person as not an ordinary person, but a very glorious and great and wonderful person, one whom you would just love to be with all the time, because whatever he says, whatever he does is beneficial not only to him, but to everyone in the whole world. And you sense and feel that. And as a result of sensing and feeling that, you do go back home because you are, in effect, following this speaker and understanding this speaker and being very much like the speaker. And so as the speaker who's going back to Godhead, so you as the inquirer will also go back to Godhead. But the principle must be there that we revere, we look up to, we have a high regard for the person who is the speaker. It's not just ordinary, and it's just not mechanical. That's a very important point.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so just to continue on Maharaj's explanation, in Chaitanya Charitamrita also you have Mukunda Datta. So when Lord Chaitanya said that, he won't get my darshan, he'll get my darshan only after millions of births, then immediately he became very happy, and all those emotions are manifested. So that through those emotions he automatically became qualified, to get the Lord's mercy. So sometimes it's just a transformation of the mind, body, and soul also matters actually to become qualified. Anyway, my question is regarding the fear, because you made a statement saying that the fear is not a natural feeling for the soul. Fear is something which is alien, like something which is not normal for the soul, right? So we can say the same thing about desire. But in the case of desire, we say that to desire is the quality of the soul, but to fear is not the quality of the soul. And we have the desire. You have a material desire, you have a spiritual desire. So desire is a part of the soul. But you also mentioned that there is fear after, there is a kind of fear in the rasa, like a spiritual fear, right? Mother Yashoda has. So that means that why is it that fear is not a quality of the soul, just like the desire? Because when you have it before and after.
I think when I don't know if did I say exactly that it's not a quality of the soul? If I did, I was intending to say that this bhayam, tīvraṁ, that's being spoken about in this verse is not a quality of the soul, because for the soul, nājayate mṛyate vākadācin, for the soul there is no birth and death to be afraid of in this way. So the potential for some kind of fear, of which this bhayam tīvraṁ is a perverted reflection, I think is what I intended to say.
So is the fear the quality of the soul, I guess? Is the fear quality of a soul?
There are eternal souls who express as one of the indirect relationships with Krishna. There are the direct rasas, and fear is not one of them. So it's not part of the constitutional position of those 5 principal rasas, but in the sub-rasas, the indirect ones, yes, soul in the spiritual world or on the spiritual level, it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that it can be part of the spiritual nature of the soul to be able to experience that. Like, also in the mood of separation, there can be separation even in meeting. It's described in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. There's when Radha is with Krishna, she can fear, even when with Krishna, there can be fear of future separation. So I'm prepared to be corrected or persuaded that it's not.
Thank you for your response.
Okay, thank you. Oh. And then we'll go.
Thank you, Drutakarma, for such a comprehensive class. It seems that the fear that's being expressed that you were talking about in the spiritual world has to do with fear in relationship to love. Like, the fear Radharani is afraid Krishna's going to leave her, and Mother Yashoda is afraid that Krishna's going to get hurt, and things like that. It seems like it's in relation to fear, whereas the fear in the material world is the fear of annihilation. But the nature of the soul, as we know from Bhagavad-gītā, the soul is never annihilated. So there's no actual reason naturally for the soul to actually feel fear in that way, the fear of annihilation. But in the spiritual world, we may feel fear, due to the love for Krishna or for, a devotee or something.
Yeah.
Also, it seems that that's a good measure of our advancement in Krishna consciousness. How much fear are we actually experiencing? Because as you stated, that a devotee who's actually surrendered to Krishna will not have fear. So if we're actually experiencing fear in our lives not related to love and so forth, then we need to actually surrender to Krishna more. Would you say that's true? That if we're experiencing fear like of annihilation and so forth, then we need to surrender to Krishna more.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, glories to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam.
Jai. Hari Bol, Drutakarma Prabhu ki Jai, Maharaj ki Jai.